You're listening to Big World Network.
Skyfire, Season 2, Episode 11, written and read by Arthur W. Johnson. Not all folks we come to know are fit to be a person's friend, but there are those who come and go who have a very evil trend. Bearclaw had cashed in on the beaver skins. He came away with a substantial amount of money, considering the number of pelts he had stolen from Seamus. He figured the extra was his due. After all, hadn't he taught the little Irishman how to trap? And shouldn't there be some kind of a teacher's fee? He would have taken more, but the canoe was hard enough to handle as it was. Still, he had enough money to avoid hard work for a while. Maybe he'd head south to winter in the warmer climates. He could always go north and trap again if he ran out of money. After collecting his payment from Kinsey, he had gone on a bender that had kept him unconscious during the time Seamus was at Fort Dearborn, so the two had not seen each other. He was sober again and wasn't enjoying it much. Maybe he'd just go have a couple more beers before he started south. What do you mean he was just here? Kyle asked. Just as I said, Kinsey replied. He was here about a week ago, and he sold me that little bale of beaver pelts over there. He bought some tools, loaded them into his canoe down there on the river, and headed out again. I can't be much clearer than that, young feller. Why are you asking anyway? Seamus is a friend of mine. We sailed over here from Ireland together. We worked the docks in New York and dug canals in Ohio. I was sick when he sailed on the Western Ladies, so I didn't know he was aboard until he shoved off at the island. Well, he and his squaw joined up with... Wait, did you say he and his squaw? Kyle asked in confusion. Why, yes, I did. Anyway, they joined up with that feller Bearclaw and went trapping together. I thought it was kind of odd when Bearclaw waltzed in here loaded with pelts, and then Seamus came in last week with a few more. But that's none of my business, is it? He described Bearclaw to Kyle. Do you know where he went? Bearclaw's around here somewhere. I hear he got stinking drunk. No, Kyle waved that answer away. Where did Seamus go? Oh, let's see. He said he was going up to the North Woods. Let me get my surveyor's map and I'll try to show you. Last time I had this down was to show him and Bearclaw how to get to the western end of Lake Superior, he said as he rummaged around blindly on the top shelf. Seamus sat right where you are and drew the route and the rivers out on a piece of paper I gave him. Now where has it gotten to? I don't feel it. It's all right. I wouldn't be able to find my way there anyway, and I've got to get back to the telegraph too. We sail in a couple of hours. I heard there was another ship built like the neighbor's original ship. Who owns her? I do, Kyle said as he turned to leave. Kyle felt low for missing Seamus by so little time. He worked his way back to one of the few taverns in Chicago. And where did that name Chicago come from anyway, he thought as he sidled up to the bar next to a large man with a lot of hair on his face and head. I'll have a pint, he said. The hairy man's head snapped around at the sound of his brogue. You another one of them Irishmen? He asked. Aye, that I am, Kyle said, staring at the odd scars on the man's face. Worked with an Irishman for a while trapping beavers. He was okay to work with, but kind of funny about sharing his Indian woman. Finally had to leave him behind and go my own way. What was his name? He called himself Seamus something. Why you asking? He is a friend of mine. I've been looking for him. Last I seen him was on the western shores of Kitchagami. Where is that? If you want to follow me back to my room, I can show you on this here surveyor's map I found. Found? Kyle silently questioned in his mind. He wondered if this smelly creature was the one who had liberated the surveyor's map Mr. Kinsey had just been searching for. Maybe he could do Mr. Kinsey a kindness and re-liberate it for him. Let me buy some whiskey to take along, Kyle said. You're my kind of man, young feller. Bearclaw showed him where he had last seen Seamus, then proceeded to guzzle the whiskey straight from the bottle. It was a good thing Kyle had bought 2 bottles of the cheap stuff. It might take every bit of it to put that one down. When Bearclaw fell into a stupor, Kyle took possession of the map and left. That's amazing, said John Kinsey when Kyle explained how he had come by the map. I didn't really think your friend would take it. He just seemed too honest. After all, he is the one who offered to draw what they needed when I refused to sell it to Bearclaw. I don't much like that fellow Bearclaw. I don't think there is much there to like, Kyle said. He's dirty, profane, dishonest, and a host of other things I can't think of right now. And that is from only knowing him for an hour. I can't imagine how Seamus stood him for an extended period of time. Your friend strikes me as being a decent man. I expect I'll see him again in spring. Can I give him a message for you? Would you do that for me?" Kenzie raised the map and said, "You were good enough to bring back my map. It's the least I can do in return." "Would you let him know when the telegraph too is due back? I would like to see him again if he can come back then too." "Certainly, my young friend. Consider it done." Dawn found Seamus sitting cross-legged outside the cabin in the north woods, staring at the carcass of the wolf. He was amazed at Bright Moon's courage and yet worried over the safety of his small family. He knew that she was comfortable in the woods, for hadn't the forest been her whole life's existence? But what about the safety of her and the boys when he was out trapping or on a trip to Fort Dearborn? What if there were another attack and he was not there to find her in time? There were so many dangers in the north woods that he knew about. Wolves normally didn't attack people, but cougars did, and he had seen signs of them all over the area. How many other dangers were there that he was not familiar with? The sun shone through the trees, but it brought no answers. He thought he should make a stronger case for taking them home to her people. "Why are you sitting alone out here, husband?" Bright Moon asked as she came out of the cabin. "I couldn't sleep," he said as he stood and gently embraced her, being careful of her wound. "You are still worried about my shoulder?" "I'm worried about you and the boys. What if I had not come back when I did?" he asked. "You would have lain there injured and bleeding, and the smell of fresh blood may have attracted other wild animals. If you were too weak to defend yourself and the boys, what would have happened?" She sat down with a thump and stared at the wolf. She couldn't deny that he was a big one. She had been lucky with her knife. Seamus squatted down beside her, and they looked at each other. She saw a single tear form in Seamus's eye. "I couldn't bear to lose you, my love," he whispered. She touched his cheek gently, and her soft smile assured him that she really did understand. "We really need to head south to your village." She looked over her shoulder at the cabin. "What about this?" "It's not important. You and the boys are what's important." "Then we must go soon." She looked earnestly at him and added, "If I look at this home you made for us too long, I may change my mind." They began packing things into the canoe, and by the time the boys were awake and fed, they were ready to start their journey south. Seamus's relief at Bright Moon agreeing to go home elated him. In his new joy, he said, "We will take the new passage I told you about, the one with all the small lakes. The people in that area told me that it's where the Fox River starts." He unrolled his tracing on the map and showed her where it was. "I understand that this river goes near the winter hunting grounds for your village, which should be about here," he said, pointing at a spot on the sketch. She looked at him skeptically. "I don't know what all this means, but I will trust you. As you said the last time we were going south, we will know when we are there." They reached the area with the lakes, and Bright Moon truly did admire the beauty of it, as he had said she would. They rested for a day before going further. The remainder of the trip downriver was uneventful except for the occasional hang-up due to the shallowness of the Fox River. They arrived at the spot Seamus thought to be their final portage and spent the night on the banks of the Fox River for one last time. In the morning, Seamus cut saplings and built a travois like he had seen Bright Moon's people use to move their goods when they changed camps each season. He took the cradle board with tall grass and strapped him onto his back while Bright Moon took Robin's. Seamus lifted the arms of the travois, and they began the journey east, leaving only the canoe as proof of their landing. On the third morning, as Seamus lifted the arms of the travois, Bright Moon sidled up to him and whispered, "We are not alone. He is not of my people, but we are being watched from behind those trees." Seamus slowly set the travois down and pulled his musket from the tethers. He loaded it and primed the pan just as he heard the distinctive zing of an arrow in flight. He dodged sideways, raised the musket, took aim at the small movement he saw, and squeezed the trigger. A dark figure with a crested headdress fell out of the bush at the tree line. Seamus reloaded and waited. He looked back to let Bright Moon know that he thought the danger was past, only to find that the arrow had missed him and struck her in the chest. "No!" he bellowed as he rushed to her side. He slipped Robin's cradleboard from her shoulders and helped her sit down. The wolf was tamer, she managed to whisper. "Let me pull," he started to say as he reached for the arrow. "No, leave it," she said as she stayed his hand. "Let me look at you while there is time." She grimaced as she lifted her hand to touch his face again. "Take care of the boys." She smiled all the way to her eyes. "I love you." With that, she slipped quietly away. He held her and rocked back and forth, oblivious to the fact that the boys were crying from the sudden noise of the muzzle blast. "Why?" he roared. "Why is the world so cruel?" It seemed every time he found happiness, someone had to spoil it. He broke off the arrow and flipped it away from himself in rage. He looked skyward from the depths of his watery eyes, and he asked, "God in heaven, Why are you doing this to me?" He remained on his knees with Bright Moon in his arms and wept as he had never done before, rocking her back and forth. Finally, when he was spent, he laid her down and removed Tallgrass's cradleboard from his own back. He slowly rose to his feet. He had to see the killer up close. He memorized the look of the dead brave before going back to Bright Moon. He chose to take her back to her people rather than bury her there. They would know the proper way to handle her remains. He gently lifted her onto the travoy and secured her, followed by the boys who had surprisingly gone back to sleep. He picked up the arms of the travoy and trudged on in a state of numbness. As it was growing dark, he looked around to the west in time to once again see the sky afire. Even at a time like this, he was amazed at the blending of the colors of the leaves in the sunset. Bright Moon would have loved to see this sight, he thought. Oh, Bright Moon, I miss you already."
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.